Did you miss me? Because it feels good to be back. So, I know that excuses are like buttholes, but for anyone who hasn't followed me on Instagram or Twitter and wants to know where I've been for like 6 weeks, here's a 20-second explanation. So, mid-February, my computer just fried. Like, it worked, and I sat down to eat lunch, and I opened it back up, and it would not turn on. It smelled like it was burning, I could hear it whirring, and then it just became a very expensive paperweight. So I ordered a new laptop. That showed up 5 days later because the postal service is fizzucked right now. And then I realized I hadn't backed up most of my new stuff for the show because the show started in December, and that's really when I started uploading. So I had to remake graphics, I had to remake sounds, I had to find sounds, reach out to people. If you guys notice, things look a little different in terms of the layout. I did decide to improve on that while I had to, redo everything. So this is being powered by Switcher Studio. Makes it a lot easier to edit and makes it a lot more user-friendly. And then after we got all that done, I went into labor and I've had my son, picture of him going up here. But so then I took time off to care for a newborn, and now I'm back. The backdrop looks different. So this is actually my childhood bedroom. My mother is my nanny. Shout out to Mama Chu. So she's actually watching Xander right now so I can make this video, and I will be working primarily from here for both my job at Switcher Inc. as well as doing these videos for you guys. So you won't see my basement layout as much anymore, but I'll be coming to you from here, and there's still bricks and purple lighting, so we're all good. Moving on. So today I've got a fun tale for you guys. This is the OG vampire. This woman is believed to be the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I'm talking, of course, about Countess Elizabeth Bathory. So this is, a case I first heard about in high school with the movie Stay Alive that came out in 2006. It had Frankie Muniz in it, and the main villain is Elizabeth Bathory. And from there, I learned the tale of hers. I learned she wasn't a vampire, but she was a pretty messed up woman. And so today, for, this Chew on That episode, we're going to learn about Elizabeth Bathory, the Countess of Blood. So, as usual, I'm a one-woman show. That's part of the reason I had so many issues after my laptop died. I had to get everything booted back up. But yeah, I've done the research, the editing, all of that, uploads for you guys, and we are back to weekly uploads, so cheer! Yay! Woohoo! So let's begin. I warn you guys in advance, I do not speak Hungarian. If I mispronounce some of these names, I'm very sorry, because I will probably be mispronouncing some of the names, except for Elizabeth Bathory. So, Countess Elizabeth Bathory de Exed, and for anyone who doesn't know for European languages like French, that means of. So, of Exed. She was born on August 7th, 1590 in the Kingdom of Hungary. So this is not just present day Hungary. This also includes what is now Romania and Slovakia. And Hungary was like, the rich, noble area, whereas Romania and Slovakia, not so much. But yeah, she was born into a very rich, very noble family, very high esteemed, and because of this, she was extremely well educated. So not only could she read and write in Hungarian, but she also could read and write in Latin and German and Greek. And in these times, women often were not educated. So this is a big deal that Elizabeth knew all of these languages and could communicate very well in all of these languages. So a sign of the times, arranged marriages were a thing and marrying young was a thing. So at age 12, she was engaged to be married to someone named Count Ferenc. again, I apologize if I'm mangling these names, but Count Ferenc Nazdadi, and he is of the lands of Nadast and Fogarisfold. That sounds good. So, you know, they did have an actual attraction to each other, which was great because a lot of times in arranged marriages, that's not a thing. And, you know, 3 years later, when she was 15, they were married on May 8th, 1575. And since they both came from noble families, especially from Elizabeth's side, was even more noble, there were over 4,500 guests. So, you know, for me who thought having, you know, 100 guests at a wedding was a big deal, this was huge. This was a huge affair. And because of her noble standing, she chose to retain her surname so that it could give her that higher standing in the Habsburg Empire. And Count Ferenc actually sometimes would add her surname onto his. So Count Ferenc Nadasti Bathory. So that way it's all together. And this was a very high-ranking family at this point. So arranged marriage went very well. Now, Count Ferenc was, again, known in himself, so was his family. He was known as the Black Knight of Hungary. He was fierce in battle, and due to all the frequent trips that he did to go to battle, it took them 10 years to have a child. He just didn't really stay home enough for them to conceive a child for several years. Once they did, they had quite a few. So the first was Anna, then they had Ursula, Katalin, Andras, and Pal. Andras unfortunately died at age 2. The rest of them, you know, grew up. Some had very low profiles, especially Pal. Some of the older ones married into other noble families. So again, very strong family ties for all these people. And they all resided in Chester Castle. Which is shown in the picture. So Elizabeth and Ferenc very quickly became partners in crime once they got married. Not only were they rich and bound together for that and in love, but they also decided to become serial killers. And they had a lot of henchmen that were just servants that also had a taste for the serial killer lifestyle. Their two main ones were known as the Cackling Crone and the Demented Dwarf, and I'm not making that up. That's what they were known as. And most commonly, this whole crew tortured peasant girls that worked as servants for them to death. And Elizabeth proved to be the most sadistic of everyone involved with the way she enacted this torture. So I have a brief list of some of her torture methods for serial killing. And if you don't get the sarcasm, it's not very brief. So here we go. These are some of the most common proved ways that she tortured people. There, of course, were other rumors like her bathing in people's blood and stuff that came out after her death, which is not a spoiler alert because this took place like 600, 700 years ago. But, you know, after her death, some of these other rumors came out and they're unfounded, of course. So these are the ones that were confirmed to be methods she used for torture. So here we go. She chained her servants up nightly, and she would beat them until they bled. And this isn't just like, oh, ow, I need a Band-Aid. Like, this was heavy-duty bleeding. She also once strangled a servant with a silk scarf. She had a joy of heating up metal things like sticks and coins and keys until they were red hot, and then burning, basically branding these servants with those items. She would also iron the soles of their feet. So she would take an iron that would be used for clothing and she would iron the soles of their feet. Again, she loved heating up metal objects. So she would take iron rods and heat them up and then stick them up their private parts. So, hey, same vein as Vlad the Impaler, but instead of impaling people, she's just burning their insides. She would stab them, just general walk by with a knife and stab. She would prick their mouths and their fingernails with needles. Now, I did some research. I couldn't find if she was doing the thing of, like, cringe warning to anyone, like, putting the needles under the fingernails and trying to pop them off. I'm sorry for anyone who just cringed at that. I'm cringing inside too, I promise. I couldn't confirm that, but she is at least stabbing them with the needles. She would cut their hands and noses and lips with scissors just randomly to, again, torture these people. She would use knives and candles and sometimes her own teeth to lacerate their genitals. She would also stitch their lips and tongues together to make it hard for them to speak and to eat. So, most of these are permanent tortures if you don't die. So very sadistic. She would make them sit on stinging nettles. She would also have them go outside and stand in tubs of ice cold water up to their necks and just watch to see how long it would take for them to die of, hypothermia and frostbite. This is something I've seen in a lot of shows, so I guess it stemmed from her doing this. She once smeared a naked servant girl with honey and put her outside to let the wilderness take care of her. Insects and animals coming over to attack and bite her with the honey all over her body. Routinely, she would refuse to let servants eat for up to a week at a time, and this would be over and over. So you don't eat for a week, you can eat for a couple days, and then you don't eat again. If they got thirsty during these periods, they would have to drink their own urine. They wouldn't be given water or wine or anything like that. She would also sometimes force them to slice off pieces of their own flesh and cook it and eat it. Oftentimes this came from their buttocks, and sometimes she would also force them to take this butt flesh and make like sausages with it and feed it to unsuspecting guests. So, if anyone's thinking of, Fallout New Vegas right now, you're not alone. And she once also heated up a cake to, a red hot temperature where it was dangerous, dangerously hot. And she made a servant girl eat that cake just to kind of burn her alive. A few last things. She baked a poisonous cake to kill a rival magistrate known as George Thurzo. She also once stuffed 5 corpses under a bed and continued to feed them as if they were alive, like just stuffing food down them. I don't know why, because they were already dead, but the woman was crazy, so whatever floats your boat, Elizabeth. And most of her dead were buried without rites, most of them in unmarked graves. So, the question becomes, why would she do this? We're going to get into that. But first, I want you guys to take a moment and think some happy thoughts, because that was a lot. That was a lot. This woman is crazy. Do you understand? Like, this woman is freaking insane, and I know that can be a lot for people. So, cleanse the palate, and we're going to get into why she was doing this, and what became of this torture. But for now, I need you guys to namaste.
Congratulations, it's me. I am the uncommon soul, and analysis paralysis is real. It's why my backlog grew massive, tearing open a hole in time-space and flinging me into a parallel dimension where the mere mention of video games gets me these looks. Somehow, I can still connect with you all though, and even play things with you. I want to do that and relive old games, but to get home, I'll have to go through a backlog of mainly action and role-playing games. And yes, there will be exceptions. It's gonna be a long trip, but I will get back home. Search Uncommon Soul on both Twitch and YouTube to keep up with me, and you may learn some links between video games that you don't even realize exist. I hope things go well for you, and above all, stay uncommon.
Welcome back, everyone. So I hope everyone took a moment to think their happy thoughts while we were on break. We're going to go back into the reasoning behind this crazy ass torture. Again, why? Why would you do this? So unfortunately, a lot of it was she was bored. She was bored, and that's why she would do this. She viewed her servants as property, not people. So it's basically the equivalent of the 4-year-old with the Barbie dolls finding the ways to torture them. Like, I remember having, like, a remote convertible for my Barbies, and I would put them and a couple of others, like Mary-Kate and Ashley and Scooby-Doo dolls in, and zoom it across my basement and have it, like, crash into the basement wall and they fly out, and it was entertaining to me. And I'd have Dr. Barbie come over and take them to the Barbie hospital, yada yada. Elizabeth Bathory was doing this as an adult woman with real life people instead of dolls. So, a lot of it was, scientific as well. She just wanted to see what could the human body withstand, what would cause different reactions with people, what could they survive, what would kill them instantly. So very sadistic torture under the guise of boredom killing scientific hypotheses. And the other thing to mention is the Bathory dynasty was one of incest, and this is true with many nobles. Even to this day, there is incest running through it. Unfortunately, it was pretty heavy in the Bathory line, and so this also played a role in her psychopathic nature. It's also on record that Elizabeth was sexually assaulted multiple times by some of her family members, including an aunt, and that is why a lot of her torture involves genitalia of people. She would even allegedly say, a lot of times if you sexually aroused her, you got tortured. So since she wanted to stay loyal to her husband, if a servant girl turned her on, it's time to torture you because you turned me on. So again, very sadistic, very psychopathic, but incest and abuse did most likely play a role in altering Elizabeth's brain chemistry to do something like this. And over the course of, 30 years, she claimed over 650 victims on her own. So again, this does not include what Count Ferenc was doing. This doesn't count what her henchmen were doing. Elizabeth alone is responsible for at least 650 victims. And this is just an estimate because there could be a lot more. But these are more or less confirmed from servants who went missing, that they were probably Elizabeth's doing, which was roughly 20 murders per year on average. So it's not like she had a running count. Some years she might have hit 50, some years maybe just one. But that's a lot of people. So things go from pretty effing good to worse for Elizabeth. On January 4th, 1604, Count Ferenc died suddenly of a mysterious illness in the middle of battle. To this day, the illness is not known, but what is known is it was probably stemming from an unknown illness that started 3 years prior. So in 1601, he started having a lot of ailments in his lower limbs. It would sometimes incapacitate him, and he kept going to battle anyway. Like, he would take a break when he needed to and then go back to battle. And it's believed that he succumbed to something going on. He was probably very ill that morning, went to battle, and just collapsed and died, basically. But Elizabeth, remember, even though it was an arranged marriage, she did love this man. They were together, for over 30 years, and she was devastated. And because of that, she became increasingly reckless with her crimes. So she amped up how many crimes a year, which is why I'm saying it's not just 20 a year, it's an average. And she was also getting sloppy with how she was committing these crimes. So instead of being very discreet, corpses were oftentimes simply tossed over the castle walls, or she would have just other servants, with the threat of, if you don't do this, you're next. They would take corpses to rivers and gardens and cemeteries and have them dumped there. So people started noticing, like, something weird's going on. If you're a Slovakian servant for the Bathorys, you might die. And eventually Elizabeth slipped up, and instead of killing one of her Slovakian peasant servants, she killed a Hungarian noblewoman. And that brought this into the mainstream. That is not something she should have done. So the king has to act at this point and investigate. So in 1610, King Matthias II told Georgi Thurzo, who was the Palatine of Hungary, to investigate complaints that had been made on Elizabeth's treatment of servants. There had been multitudes of complaints, especially once corpses just started tumbling over castle walls. But after the Hungarian woman died, he couldn't just ignore the complaints any longer, even with the noble status of the Bathory family. So Thurzo arrives to the Czechte castle with some troops. We're gonna continue pronouncing it like that. I know there's a lot of you're supposed to do like the back of throat thing that I've never been able to do, but I'm gonna say that's how you pronounce a C and an S together, like that. So to castle with some troops, and they found nearly a dozen servants dead or near death upon their arrival. So it's not like they were just laying in the front lobby, but as they're maneuvering around the castle, looking around, looking in rooms, looking on the grounds, they find nearly a dozen people mortally wounded, basically. And all had been brutalized by Elizabeth Bathory and left to die. And again, some were dead, some were dying and could not be saved. So it was reported that this was an active crime scene. It's an active crime scene. There's nothing else to call it, whether you're noble or not. So Thurzo enlists the aid of 2 notaries to collect witness statements, because even though this is happening on the grounds, it's not known who's doing this. And there's rumors to who's doing this, but especially it being a countess, they can't just be like, okay, you come with me for no reason. There needs to be a lot of proof. So over the next few months, 52 total statements were collected that kind of point the blame. They all have similar stories. They have evidence that Elizabeth is the one doing this. And of course, Count Ferenc was involved, but he's already dead. He's been dead for 6 years at this point. But that she has servants that are doing this with her. So on December 30th, 1610, Elizabeth Bathory and 4 of her high-rank servants that were her accomplices for these crimes were all arrested and charged, with torture and murder. Now, another rumor about Elizabeth is that she was rumored to be caught in the act of killing someone and bathing in their blood. Like, she was standing naked in a bathtub with blood dangling, dripping on her. That's another rumor. It's been reported in Thurzo's notes that she was just eating dinner when they arrested her. So very mundane. We often like to amp up the intensity of stuff, and that would be great for a movie, but in real life, this woman was just eating dinner. It was probably a part of a servant's flesh knowing her, but still, she was eating dinner when she was arrested. So she ended up being sentenced to life on house arrest, and because of that, she was confined to a single bricked windowless room. And they didn't want to, do a full trial for her because of who she was. It would cause a lot of public chaos. The story's going to leak anyway, but to have it out in the papers, basically, or whatever equivalent of papers they had back then, they didn't want to do that. So instead of a trial, because there's enough proof against her, they just kind of bricked her into a room and said, you're gonna stay here. She was 50 years old, and her 4 servants, though, were kind of the patsies. I mean, they were guilty, but publicly they were made to take the blame. So they were charged with murder and publicly executed, while Elizabeth, the main mastermind, was bricked into a room. And that's where she stayed. She had as good a life as you could from a room. Like, I'm getting Rapunzel vibes at this point from her. But 4 years later, on August 20th, 1614, Elizabeth kind of motioned to her bodyguard who was outside. She still had bodyguards and stuff, of course. and she told him that her hands were cold, and she didn't know why they were cold, and the bodyguard, was like, I'm sure it's nothing, just try to get some rest, it's probably a cold or something, get some sleep and you'll be fine. So she did go to sleep, and unfortunately she never woke back up, and the next morning when he went to check on her, he found she had passed away. Official cause of death unknown, but it was known the night before she reported her hands being cold and that she just felt kind of off. So she was buried in the church of Chekste on November 25th, 1614. And she, due to public uproar of this woman being in their church, they relocated her body to her hometown of Exed. They interred her there, had to move her again, and the current location of her body is unknown. It's not marked anywhere because they don't want crazy people going and finding her grave and 21st century taking selfies with her grave or trying to dig up her bones or anything like that. They were like, it's going to be better just to not mark this down whatsoever. But yeah, that's the case of Elizabeth Bathory. So she just very sadistic woman, very torturous woman. After this, in accordance with her will, her estates, her land, and her possessions were all inherited by her surviving 4 children. So that way these remained in the Bathory family. To this day, there's still active offshoots of the Bathory line. I'm not sure how those people are received or if it's even known. Most of them have married and elected to change their surname, so it's not as obvious unless you do the research. But these people are still on the ballot. It's not like they said to her children, you can't be fruitful and multiply. So her family line is still out there, as incestuous as it was, but less sadistic now because there's not more incest being bred into it. And Elizabeth's, who she is inspired numerous art forms, in the years after her death. So, of course, the unconfirmed rumor is that she inspired the character of Dracula for Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. What is confirmed is Bram's great-great-nephew, Dr. Stoker. He wrote a book in the 20th century called Dracula the Undead, and this book I shouldn't say stars, but it has a character based on Elizabeth Bathory in it as the main antagonist. So, whether Bram was inspired by her or not, his great-great-nephew definitely was. There's hundreds of publications that include Elizabeth Bathory's likeness, but some that I wanted to include on here for you guys. Seth Grahame-Smith's book, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which I'm sure a lot of you guys enjoy. It was made into a movie as well. That incorporates Elizabeth Bathory. I mentioned at the start of this episode the 2006 American film Stay Alive, which I personally love, especially the director's cut. The theater cut was decent. The director's cut's really good. And it stars her as the main antagonist, the main villain. For anyone watching this on YouTube, the screenshot up here is from that movie, and you can see Elizabeth in the background. The 2002 video game Blood Rain also had inspirations of Elizabeth, and there's a Swedish black metal band called Bathory that is still active to this day. And they have a lot of singles based on Elizabeth. For any of you guys who saw the promo I did for this episode on Instagram on Saturday night, so 2 nights ago from the day this goes up on YouTube, I put one of their songs as the background on that story. So the band Bathory. But there's a lot of bands that incorporate Elizabeth Bathory, including one from Ohio. Most of them are metal bands. Surprise, surprise. And that's nothing against metal. It's just, you wouldn't really see a Christian band called Elizabeth Bathory. I would love to see it. If any of you guys out there are Christian rockers and you make a band called Elizabeth Bathory, shoot me a message or something. I'd love to hear your music. I pretty much listen to anything but gospel, so just don't send me gospel music, and we're good. But yeah, there's lots of video games, books, music, movies based on this woman, and it's because her story is so fascinating, and a lot of these stay pretty true to the story, which is what I brought to you guys today. A lot of them use some of the rumors, like her bathing in virgin blood and everything. Some even have a sympathetic take. Remember, she was a product of incest, and she was also an abuse victim as a child, so a lot of people have more of a sympathetic view of her despite her crimes, that she would probably just be tried for insanity in today's standards. So ever float your boat, there's a ton of things on her, but that is the story of Elizabeth Bathory. So I do want to thank you guys for tuning in. I want to thank you guys for being patient with me through a broken laptop and finding files. I have all my files backed up now, and then also maternity leave, because I wanted to take a month and heal and spend time with my son before doing videos again. But I am back to normal uploads, so you'll be getting a true I'm mixing all my words together. Oh my god. A Chew on That episode every week. You'll also be getting an additional episode on my YouTube every week, just based on, a vlog, a game, cooking, whatever I choose to do. Maybe some yoga for you guys. I don't know. Also, of course, be sure to follow me on my social medias, which are right below. That way you keep up to date with any books I'm writing. You can see the reels I'm doing for Instagram. I'm a lot more active on stories now, so I love interacting with you guys on there. I'm at the Angie Chew on pretty much any platform. Again, they're right down here for those of you guys watching on YouTube. And thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to, like the video if you enjoy this. Leave a comment on what you think about Elizabeth Bathory. Had you heard of her before? A lot of people, either when I say her name, they either go, who? Or they're like, oh my god! And they have so many details to just word vomit out. So let me know, had you heard from her? And had you heard the actual tale? Or had you heard the, jazzed up, horror movie side rumor tale? Definitely let me know that. And be sure to subscribe. That way you'll get the bonus video later this week. I'll probably do another creepy story time one, because I really enjoyed the last one I did. And then of course next week you'll have another Chew on That episode for another crime story. So thank you so much for tuning in, my Chewsters, for sticking with me. We did hit 1,000 subs while I was on my hiatus, so I will be making a very special appreciation video for you guys for that too. And I will see you next time, my Chewsters. Bye bye.